watching Beyond Market, where we bring you up to speed on development outcomes on the continent. Welcome, I'm Esther, Awoniyi. Many thanks for joining us. On today's show, we'll explore the impact of the coronavirus pandemic on food security and smallholder farmers. As always, you can join the conversation on social media. Let me know what you think about the topics we discuss. And to do so, use the hashtag Beyond Market. You can also send your thoughts and your comments to my Twitter handle too. It's at Esther O. Awoniyi. The World Health Organization has expressed concerns about the rapid evolution of the COVID-19 pandemic in Africa and notes that it is one of the biggest health challenges Africa has faced in a generation. So how will this impact food security, particularly smallholder farmers in Nigeria? Ndidi Nwuneli, co-founder and managing partner, Sahel Consulting, joins me to discuss this and more. Thank you, Ndidi. It's a pleasure to have you on the show today. Now, obviously, you've been following the news with the coronavirus, or COVID-19, and now we have cases rising in Lagos at the moment. And of course, there have been concerns around food security. If we do get to a situation where the government might need to declare some kind of a lockdown or a shut-in or a stay-at-home order as well, what kind of disruptions can we expect? And right now, in your opinion, what should be our response, perhaps from a policy perspective? What should we do to protect ourselves?
Well, the first thing is that COVID-19 is a mixed blessing for Nigerian farmers and Nigerian agriculture. With other countries closing their borders, it means that there's less dumping of food in Nigeria, which then makes us aware about the sense of urgency to look inwards and substitute for a lot of our dependency globally. This affects industries such as dairy, where you see Europe as a huge dairy exporter to the West Africa region, especially Nigeria. As they clamp down on their countries, that affects dairy imports into Nigeria and makes us realize how valuable our sector is and how much investment we should be making. The same applies to palm oil and soya and maize, which we still import in significant quantities. And so clearly, there are opportunities, but there are also risks. Now, what we haven't done is plan for this. We didn't know it was coming, and so it's not like we have silos full of grains and warehouses stocked with food. And so unfortunately, we are going to be at risk. So it's a bittersweet. In the immediate short term, there's hyperinflation, there's panic buying, and because we're in the dry season, many of our farmers do not have produce to sell. Now, we're going into the rainy season, and the challenge for the government, and what my policy recommendation is that you treat agriculture as an essential industry. Just like we need hospitals running, we need food companies operating, we need pharmaceutical firms fully operational, and we need farmers on their farms. Of course, we can practice this social distancing on farms because our farmers already literally work far away from each other, and there's enough room between farmers. I think there's a lot to do in that area. We also, from a policy perspective, need to really strengthen our extension services. Right now, we have one extension worker to over 3,000 farmers. That's unacceptable. Just like the healthcare workers visit people, we need extension workers to be able to support farmers because they are essential to our survival during this period where every country is looking internally and every country is strengthening its capacity to support itself. And this, I think agriculture and food are an essential service. We don't want people dying of hunger because they can't get food. We can't be more concerned about COVID-19 when food is medicine. If you don't have food, you can't recover. If you don't have beverages, you can't recover. So you need access to fruits and vegetables as essential vitamin C and other nutrients to keep your body strong. You need access to protein. So I really think the government has to prioritize this sector and all the key actors in the sector and support them during this period of crisis.
Now, speaking about support, the Central Bank of Nigeria, as you know, already came out to announce some policy measures, announced a moratorium, for example, of 1 year on all principal payments from the 1st of March, especially for its anchor borrowers, a number of schemes, but also inclusive the anchor borrowers program. But I'd like to hear your thoughts on the anchor borrowers program, where we've seen single-digit interest rates to farmers. We've seen a lot of support, and rice would be a very good example. We've seen a lot of our farmers, especially when the border even closed, that was a test, and we did see a number of them step up to the plate and produce more locally produced rice. But just your general thought on Anchor Borers program and the amount of money that's gone in and effort and the commensurate benefits as you see them now.
Well, Nigerian farmers have been largely excluded from the financial services sector. The data we recently looked at said that about 97% still operate with cash, a large percentage are unbanked, and they're really excluded from this sector. Now, so the Anchor Borers scheme, on face value, was very promising because the idea of basically providing access to farmers and ensuring links to markets is critical for farmers to not only scale, but also improve their livelihoods and ensure that we can have competitive value chains in our country. Where it's worked is where it's been linked directly to off-takers because there's an anchor. So there's a private company that's going to buy your grains or your rice, your soya, your whatever, cassava. That's where it works. Where it's viewed as, a government initiative, the repayment rates have been very low. And so we've seen that there's a model for the Anchor Borers scheme that works, and that's what we need to support in the new dispensation. It has to be linked to value chains, it has to be linked to markets. Otherwise, some farmers will receive the funds after the planting season. The funds will not be able to be utilized for inputs, which is what it's supposed to be utilized for, etc. And so the timing is so critical in the agriculture sector. If farmers are not receiving the funds right now, March, April, then it's too late for the planting season, right? Even with climate change. So the sense of urgency around how this is deployed, how efficiently it's deployed, and how integrated it is with financial markets and financial institutions determines whether it's successful or not.
I'd like to hear your thoughts also on the current value chain in the country. Speaking to some, and I've had a couple of them, speaking to some farmers, especially in the private and the business arm of things, they talk about the fact that yes, we've seen a lot of government intervention schemes led by the CBN. It's working, farmers don't have access to credit, but they keep talking about, mechanization. We're not putting enough firepower into it. I mean, small scale, yes, the smallholder farmers, they are at the center of this, but you're just giving them seeds, sometimes cash is not enough. We need mechanization. We need to be able to plant on a larger scale, produce, and also, very importantly, process. That side of the value chain is still a bit weak. Your thoughts?
I think most of our value chains are still extremely fragmented and extremely distorted. There's very little communication between the inputs, the seed providers, the farmers themselves, the aggregators, the logistics providers, the processors, and the consumers. And there are very few value chains in Nigeria that are fully integrated. We see some promise in poultry, for example, where Nigerian poultry is becoming more competitive relative to imported poultry. We see glimpse of hope in the maize value chain and the soya value chain. Sorghum, because we have key companies that are purchasing sorghum, like Nigerian breweries and Guinness, they are driving a formalization of that market. But other markets are highly, highly fragmented.
How do we close these gaps? It would appear that we've identified what the challenges are.
We know what the challenges are. The biggest issue is that the stakeholders across the value chains have not formed very comprehensive associations. I'll give you an example. In cassava, we have now very good work being done in cassava seeds. Sahel Consulting is part of an initiative called Basics, where we have these innovations in cassava seeds. Fantastic. Then you have the Cassava Growers Association, the Cassava Farmers Association, then you have the Cassava Processors Association. And they're all working to support their own causes and their needs. We need umbrella associations that connect all of them. Because what happens when farmers grow cassava and there's an abundance of cassava and the processors are not purchasing cassava because there's no demand from the off-takers, do you understand, from the consumers. So that whole link needs to be strengthened. And what we're not seeing is that policy directive as well.
I was going to ask,
because there needs to be an anchor who brings them together. Who has the convening power. In many instances, it's government. Not just at the federal level, but at the state level. I would strongly urge many, many states to really think about value chain strategies. I think Kaduna State is doing a really good job when it comes to key sectors like maize and ginger. You see the state saying we're going to take a pivotal role. We're trying to do that now in dairy. We've just launched Advancing Local Dairy Development Program in Nigeria, funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. In every state we're working, Plateau, Kano, Jigawa, Kaduna, Adamawa, we have the state governments basically putting all the actors together, and the state government signing an MOU between the processor, who is the key off-taker of that milk, and the farmers, Sahel's role, and the government's role. All of them are critical to make this dairy sector work. And unless you have the states actually rising up and looking at their competitive and comparative advantages and really picking a few key value chains that they'll organize and they'll support holistically, you're not going to see the transformation.
But surely the government sees this happening, and I'm wondering, and obviously this is something hopefully that can be replicated in other sectors. So why are we not seeing, why is there no movement in that
We're starting to see some movement in a few critical states where they recognize how important agriculture is to their well-being and to job creation. But unfortunately, many of our states have not risen up to understand the importance of internally generated revenue. So they will perhaps need
the federal government to stand behind and say, you know what, we need to do this as a matter of urgency, because obviously there has to be some kind of a catalyst.
Definitely, definitely. And I think COVID-19 is pushing us to see how important it is for countries to stand on their own. This dependency that Nigeria has had on its food imports for so many key ingredients has to stop. I think the oil shock is also setting us up to realize, we've said it before.
But you know, we've been here in
2016. Agriculture is the new oil.
We're here in 2016.
Yes, but then
these were the conversations we had then.
But then the prices swing back up, and then people say, okay. I remember in 2016, I got calls from everyone in the oil sector saying, I want to get into agri. Ndidi, how can I get into agri? And I was supporting them, giving them ideas. After a while, the call stopped. 2020 is the year of reckoning. We have two major shocks that we did not fully prepare for. And if we don't learn this time, I think God has given us enough reasons and enough opportunities to see the writing on the wall. Guys, you're naturally endowed for agricultural excellence. Why are you not leveraging this sector? Why aren't you investing in it? Why aren't you developing it? And why aren't you making data-driven policies to support the sector?
Now, you're a player in the sector also through Sahel Agriculture and Nutrition. And I know that Sahel you also provide a value chain analysis, market entry strategies, etc. I mean, just what would you say is the most significant work you're doing so far, what you're seeing on the ground?
Well, we're involved in very important interventions around seed sector. We're doing a lot in the yam seed sector, the cassava seed sector, and we're helping set up a new maize hybrid company. And all of these are basically saying Nigerian farmers need access to improved seeds. We can't be using seeds from 1970. And in the core value chains, there's been great research done by IITA and other institutions. Now we're commercializing them. We're getting them into the hands of entrepreneurs who can become seed entrepreneurs. So that's one very important aspect of our work. The second is what I've mentioned in dairy. For the last 3 years, we did the Nigerian Dairy Development Project. It worked. We were partnered with Friesland Campina and LNZ to really source milk locally. Now we're moving to 6 states in partnership with a range of private companies that have said we're going to source locally. Nigerian milk can be competitive. And that's really exciting, and we're providing them with a lot of support, putting nomadic communities into clusters, okay. Linking them up with the whole value chain, providing them with artificial insemination, healthcare workers, creating a feed and fodder industry so that these cows don't have to travel to get food. Entrepreneurs can sell hay and silage to them right there. And then empowering the women, because the women own the milk in many of these communities, the men own the cows. So empowering them with financial literacy, access to financial services, putting these clusters and strengthening these clusters and ensuring that these companies have access to high quality milk. That will transform the sector and ensure that our children can afford milk, which will also address our nutrition challenges.
Absolutely. Ndidi, we'll just pause here, take a break and come back. I must thank you for your time so far. Thank you for talking to us. I've been speaking to Ndidi Nwuneli. She's a co-founder and managing partner, Sahel Consulting, Agriculture and Nutrition. We'll be right back after this short break to join us again. Welcome back to Beyond Market. If you're just joining us, Ndidi Nwuneli, co-founder and managing partner, Sahel Consulting, Agriculture and Nutrition, is our guest today. And we have been assessing what the future holds for Nigeria's agriculture value chains in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic. Ndidi, thank you for your time so far.
My pleasure.
You know, while all of this is happening, let me just quickly, I wanted to just quickly talk about the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. This is a year, I mean, it's still on, that we were supposed to, take things a step further, take advantage of regional value chains and just strengthen our position as an as a country that practices agriculture. But what does that leave us now? What are the opportunities, and what changes in our preparation to better position ourselves to take advantage?
Well, with the closure of the Seme border, there's been very, very limited trade between Nigeria, Benin Republic, Togo, and Ghana. That access has been completely shut down, and that's actually been a double-edged sword, a mixed blessing. In one perspective, you say, well, it's prevented imports and dumping, but another perspective is that it's also restricted Nigerian farmers and Nigerian processors from accessing those markets. We still have a lot of smuggling through porous borders, but we haven't seen this policy directive really take off across Nigeria. When we did a study about 3 years ago about trade between Nigeria, Burkina Faso, Niger, Ghana, Togo, Benin, we saw that there was so much informal trade occurring. It wasn't even being captured. Trade of onions, Nigerian millet and sorghum, trade of rice with a lot of inflows of rice through the north. Trade in finished and packaged goods like Maggi that are really sought after in countries like Niger. But that trade was not documented. And I feel that some of our processes we're not ready for prime time when it comes to trade, because first we have to get our borders secure. These informal borders will never help anybody, and there are too many. I think when we did the study, we counted 16 informal borders just across the northern axis. We're not even talking about the south, 16. And every night they're busy, and they still are busy, unfortunately. So if you just focus on the formal borders, you don't automate, you don't create incentives, right, for formal registration, then you will not see the benefits. I was excited when we finally signed, because I see the West African market as a natural market for Nigerian products. But I think the systems and structures, the documentation, the incentives and the disincentives have to be addressed. And the big word corruption also has to be addressed amongst the key stakeholders involved in managing our borders.
Interesting. Now, by the year 2050, Africa will have a population of about 2.4 billion people. And the conversation around food security, back to that again, let's circle back to that. Food security, is gaining more momentum. I mean, we have a lot of internally displaced people. We have the crisis in the Sahel. It's getting worse as insurgency, and that we're being told is is worsening the situation as it is. How worried or concerned are you? Looking at how we're progressing with our agriculture system here, getting the value chains to be stronger, empowering farmers more, getting mechanized if we are, and then looking at it side by side to the growing food security problem and insurgency.
I am actually very optimistic about the agriculture sector in Africa. And recently, Sahel launched an initiative called NourishingAfrica.com. Basically, Nourishing Africa is a hub for 1 million agripreneurs across Africa. And we believe these agripreneurs and food entrepreneurs will transform this sector. What we're providing on the hub is access to financing, knowledge, data, e-learning, skills, where they can find staff, where they can find each other. We believe there's an information asymmetry, and unfortunately that's creating distortions. So we have entrepreneurs sitting in Lagos who need pineapple. They don't know where to source it, right? They produce pineapple chips or pineapple juice. There are farmers sitting in Calabar who have too much pineapple. They don't know each other. They don't have any way to connect. So through Nourishing Africa, we're not only connecting our entrepreneurs within our countries, we're connecting them across Africa. And just 2 weeks ago, we had events in Morocco, in Kenya, in South Africa, connecting these entrepreneurs, building their skills and supporting them, both online and offline events, to showcase their work. If every African, when we become 2.4 million, just spends $1 on food, we'll have over an $800 billion industry. If we spend $10 on food, we're talking about an $8.7 trillion industry. In between there's money to be made, and Africans have to be at the forefront of defining the future of our sector. We've left it for too long to global trading companies and export companies that are just focused on extraction. We have to dominate in this sector. That means we have to source locally, we have to process locally, and we have to be competitive to meet our taste buds, but also the global taste buds.
If we're going to be competitive, if we're going to dominate, we need to have good amount of investment in research and development and also innovation.
Definitely. Research and development is critical, and that's why I talked about the work we're doing with seed systems, right? But then also we
Well,
have
need
to invest
scale
in
that.
value
I mean,
addition.
you are just one company or two companies.
Definitely. We have to invest in value addition and processing. And that's why we're creating these knowledge hubs. If you go on nourishingafrica.com, you'll see all the resources available to entrepreneurs to scale, all the funding available. We're also creating podcasts and e-learning curriculum to build their skills, because we realize many of them don't know how to grow in the space. They don't also know how to invest in the space and how to process in the space. So we're trying to bridge the knowledge gaps to ensure that we can scale. When AGRA did a study last year, they said 81% of the food provided in Africa is by African entrepreneurs. Most of them are small and medium-sized businesses. We know that they exist, but how can they scale? They need to scale to be able to reduce their costs and maximize the benefits in the sector. Farmers alone are not going to be able to do it if you don't have processors, you don't have cooks, you don't have chefs. I mean, thankfully, there's a whole new renaissance around African food. So that demand pull is also making African food, more appreciated by Africans, young Africans. So we're saying our food is great, our food can compete. I'm in this new mode where I'm saying, why can't we have injera synonymous with sushi? Why can't jollof rice be synonymous with paella? Why can't we promote and celebrate the great food?
Export the African cuisine.
And make the rest of the world recognize how amazing our food is and how nutritious it is. Because everybody wants nutritious food today. Gluten-free, protective foods, and our foods are naturally nutritious. And so that whole mindset shift, starting locally, then regionally and internationally, I think will transform the sector. And that's why media has an important role to play, because also you guys, in terms of how you brand African food and how you brand African agriculture, changes the mindset. So we're not just focused on exporting sesame seeds or exporting cocoa buds or cashew. We're focused on, value addition. The rooibos. I mean, I love the rooibos example. Rooibos is tea from South Africa. It's been drunk all over the world. When I go to conferences all over the world, I ask them, do you know where rooibos tea is from? They're like, no. I'm like, South Africa. The only place it's grown is South Africa. It's become now really celebrated as a very healthy alternative, right, to green tea. And that's the same way. So rooibos tea competes with green tea from China. That's what we need for all our food. And we have the potential to feed ourselves and feed the world. So this 2.4 for me is an opportunity. 2.4 billion people, yes, we can feed ourselves and the world. And we have to change our mindsets around it.
But can we have more support from the private sector? I know a couple of companies are partnering with this, especially smallholder farmers, education, training, and all of that. But do we need more private sector showing at this point?
Definitely. The private sector is going to drive this growth. I mean, I'm writing a book right now on Africa's nourishing itself and nourishing the world, 2.4 billion. And it's the private sector that's going to drive it. And when we say private sector, we're not just talking about big businesses like Nestle and Nigerian Breweries and Olam. We're talking about Ace Foods. We're talking about So Fresh. We're talking about small companies that are going to become medium, and from medium, they're going to become large. And then we're going to have the African companies that become the Nestles of the future. That's how we have to change our mindset. I'm encouraged by the examples of Olam, which started in Nigeria in 1989, and today is traded on the Singapore Stock Exchange. It's a multi-billion-dollar company. Why can't we have African examples that compete and rival those ones?
From a policy perspective, what is that one policy move or thrust that you would like to see now that you think can be a good catalyst to take us from a step closer to being food, self-sufficient in food, or just generally strengthening the food chain?
Well, for many years I've been preaching about local sourcing, and I've basically said, just like you have a local bill that says you have to source petroleum products a certain percentage, we need that for food. Every single company operating in Nigeria has to source at least 60% of their food locally. Their food imports and their packaging and everything locally. A few companies have already started doing that. That will force us to build our local supply chains. If you challenge every single company in Nigeria and every single company operating in Africa to source at least 60% of their inputs for their production locally, that would be a game changer for me. The second is we need to totally revamp our educational system. Education, we haven't produced people for this sector. Most people who study agriculture as their third or fourth choice option, and they want to get out of the sector. We need to create and ensure that everybody who's studying business, in fact, in every course in Nigeria, agribusiness should be mandatory, because this is the one value chain that we can succeed on. If you make, just like everybody's saying coding, agribusiness, make it mandatory for every university student who's studying business that they have to study agribusiness. Everybody studying agriculture has to study business. To understand that agriculture is not just a science, it's a business. Because we need workers for this sector. We need food technologists. We need quality control specialists. We need people who can, we need agricultural engineers who can ensure that our factories have the right equipment. We don't have the skills. In ACE Foods and Sahel, my number one challenge is skilled labor. Oh. Passionate and skilled labor. And everybody in this sector has the same problem. And so I really want the entire educational system and research institutions to revamp the entire curriculum.
Ndidi, I must thank you for your time today. Thank you so much. Very insightful conversation there with you. Thank you for your time on the show today.
Thank you so much.
I've been speaking to Ndidi Nwuneli. She's a co-founder and managing partner, Sahel Consulting, Agriculture and Nutrition. Well, that's our show for today. Thank you so much for being a part of it. Remember, you can watch the show at 5 p.m. West African time daily and have access to all previous episodes of the show on our website at cnbcafrica.com. You can also stay engaged with the hashtag Beyond Markets, and of course, you can send your thoughts and your comments to my Twitter handle too. It's at Esther Awoniyi. From myself and the team, it's bye for now.